Why Cleveland Force? Why the rebrand? How did we get here?
Yeah, I think it's important to look back before we can look forward. And the Cleveland Force was a very prominent and well-supported and successful professional indoor soccer team in the early 80s. The league folded sometime in the mid 80s. And from that team, you had my father, Joe Raduka, you had Ali Kazamani, and you had George and Louis Nanchoff that were all teammates on that team, and they played under the Cleveland Force umbrella. So when you look at what occurred after their careers had ended, they all started their own youth soccer clubs in the market. They stayed in Cleveland. They loved the community. They loved the people. They were well known in the community, and they were able to start a business here that was extremely successful and well supported. And when we started looking at this, Everett, you and I started talking about this many, many years ago about how do we bring what we're trying to achieve individually, how do we come together to achieve more?
Yes.
And that's what this whole idea was, is how do we give up our own ownership, our own controls, to be able to work together to create something bigger and better for the city of Cleveland. And with the help of Greg and Shaw Abrams, who had the rights to the name Force, we formulated a strategy that would say, now that we've brought Ali Kazamani with CSA Impact, we brought Joe Raduka with Cleveland United, we brought George and Louis Nanchoff with International's Boys Soccer Club. Now we have some of the original teammates all together now, and it was just perfect harmony to go back to the name Cleveland Force, so that their life cycle of them coming together as teammates now allows them to be chairmen on the end of their careers in the Cleveland Force as well. So, we have a long history of those three clubs independently. Now we have this new history of an old name with a new future under the name of Cleveland Force.
Yeah, absolutely love that. And then continue to think about the rebrand and building on that as traditions that came with that, right? That came with, Ali Kazamani at a Cleveland Soccer Academy, or, as you mentioned, George Nanchoff with Internationals and Joe with Cleveland United. Those traditions that they brought has really molded Cleveland Force to say, hey, look, they had a strong following of people around Northeast Ohio. So we want to respect that as well, that we brought these three very prominent clubs together to also say we want to have three very prominent training centers around Northeast Ohio to cultivate the top talent in Northeast Ohio, but also share the passion that these gentlemen had for the game, because they were teammates, they enjoyed each other, and they competed with each other, no different than we still do today with the whole thing. So we think it's just a nice symbolic way of, respecting them and showing the care and the love that we have for them, and as we carry that in the Cleveland Force today.
Yeah, and you look at those players and their pathways, they're all unique. I'll use my father as an example. My father, who at a young age was a junior Yugoslavian national team player, played for one of the biggest clubs in the world at that time in Red Star Belgrade. He was the first player that was able to leave the Yugoslavian professional league at a young age. Typically, you'd have to be over the age of 22 to be able to get rights to leave the country as a player. So they granted him rights, and he came over to North America, where his second father, a huge mentor and father figure for him, who was Milan Mandaric, who owned the Oakland Stompers. And he called my father across, and my father ultimately decided to go and play for him. And then the rest is history. My father stayed in North America, and he hopped around a few North American soccer club teams around the continent, and ultimately ended in Cleveland when the old NASL folded in Edmonton. He and about a half dozen of his teammates, that some of those teammates that left Edmonton that came to Cleveland still reside here and call this home today. So, to come full circle back with those teammates still, who some of which still operate and own youth soccer clubs in the market. It's kind of a unique story that not many people might know, that have young kids in this youth soccer landscape of really what's the history of club soccer in Northeast Ohio, and who are the people that really were the founding fathers of this. And as we look at it as the second generation, we now have to take what they taught us and to elevate what's been given to us, right? They laid the groundwork down for 20 to 30 years. Now it's our turn to ultimately improve upon that, and we've gotten a head start because of them, although it hasn't been easy with our mergers and acquisitions and the blend. But, we've done big things in the market that have been supported, and at times maybe not supported. But at the end of the day, we are highly ambitious. We're trying to do more for the community. Back when we were players in the youth game here, there was less clubs. They were more competitive, so you didn't have to travel around the country to get good, meaningful games. You had them at home, and you knew how to get up for games. You knew how to defend your home field. That has been lost in these generations because the soccer landscape's become diluted. Everybody opens up a club now, which is fine, but the player pools have been diluted. So what we've done is we've brought 3 prominent clubs back together so that our player pools are stronger, and we're able to go and play against better competition and achieve success and help push players along their reach their goals and ambitions.
Speaking of Joe, I mean, can you share a little bit about Joe and maybe how he's influenced you as a player and how you kind of lead our organization?
Sure. You know, I'm a Cleveland kid and played for my father's club growing up, and unfortunately did not bode well when my father was my coach, right? We butted heads. Same thing as when I worked with him. Yep. So, you know, we just have personalities that don't mesh when it comes to the on-field. Mm-hmm. So, you know, off the field's been great, but when I was young, he had a hard time coaching me, I had a hard time being coached by him. And although we had very successful teams with very talented players on our team, specifically Coach Chris Green, who was my teammate for all of my youth years at Cleveland United, mm-hmm. which was one of the founding clubs that formulated Cleveland Force. You know, we had a lot of talent, but we were uncoachable, which I think has formulated me to be a better coach, to know that I can't let players waste their opportunities because of the time that I've had as a player where we didn't take it as seriously because we weren't maybe disciplined enough, mm-hmm. focused enough, driven enough, goal-oriented enough, where we just won based on pure talent. Yeah. You know, for my father, he, you know, really instilled in me the way to treat people, how to treat and give kids confidence, how to especially treat parents, how to welcome people, how to say hello to everybody, how to shake hands. Don't be fearful. In our industry, too many coaches, too many directors are fearful of the interactions with parents. You know, they try to avoid it, whereas, you know, I've been in the upbringing of making sure you have that human side to yourself, be a person first, make sure that they understand that their kids are in good care of good people, and that will help alleviate a lot of the stresses that parents have when they have questions they don't know, you know, who to go to, how to answer it, and if people are not approachable. So I think that's really helped our organization. We hear that about a lot of our directors is, you know, we have that in us now where directors are very personable with our staff. Coach Vishnu does a great job. Coach Chris Green, just as 2 people to make as an example, have really gotten a lot of applause from their parents that they oversee in their organization and their programs, so that you know, they have a great experience. They feel as though they're heard, that they understand the person that's working with them and their child.
Yeah, Joe has been really influential in my pathway. I was blessed as well to play for Joe and George in my own way, and as a guest player with internationals where I'd go to Cleveland United, and just the lessons that we were learning, just to kind of build off of what you said about Joe as far as like teaching us to be good young men and be personable and be kind. I always remember going over to Sweden, and he would do these little games and do different things like that. But he was always speaking to us about like, hey, just represent yourself well. You're in another country. You're doing these different things. But he always was having fun with us, you know. So understanding like how do we interact with our parents, how we interact with the players. The Kiki candies mean something, right? It's got to be fun. It's got to be enjoyable first and foremost. And their mentorship, you know, just being in the beginning of everything that we've done when we sat around the table there at Richmond to develop our core values, develop our traditions that we're starting to build on. They always spoke to us about coming into a building, saying hi to our parents, making sure that we have an interaction with them, which actually inspired maybe something from us being unique again with our check-in meetings and our IDPs that we offer our families, where we sit and develop development plans to make sure everyone knows it's about the player. You know, we have great teams, we have great organization, we have pathways for them, but we really are focused on building that opportunity to be vulnerable with our families too. And I think, you know, Kaz in his way, George Nanchoff and Joe have always exemplified that, a stern presence to them, understanding we got to get things done and be disciplined, but also that we also have to interact in this space together and enjoy each other's company. So I think their part of our history has really kind of shaped the way that we go about doing things, and has inspired us to continue to try and be innovative in how we serve our membership and how we serve our customers going forward. So really appreciate those guys. The more and more I look back.
Absolutely. I mean, they were some of the first club operators in the market, and they, you know, really instilled a lot of our values as kids growing up, influenced us in many ways. And you look at the culture of our club now, where you have a representation of so many different coaches and directors that have come from those three clubs. Georgie Nanchoff Jr. is still a part of the club, an integral part in the younger boys program, where you have this blended culture that we've kind of melted into our own, where it's been really unique because, in all fairness, all three of those cultures were different.
Yeah.
And now you look at our organization, we're very multidimensional in our approach with the balance between having a kid have a great time and a great experience versus being highly competitive and going after it and trying to see if we can get results. So, we are a club that I think because of that, we're able to be successful as a diverse organization where we can facilitate the needs and expectations of kids at every single level and their parents.
Yeah, and I love what you just said about every single level, right? Because now you look at the organization, how it's evolved from the vision and image that they kind of implanted with us a long time ago. So we have a high-performance environment that we instill a different type of culture, different type of standards that we're looking to do. It always brings me back to those days of the Cleveland United days, the Internationals days, especially when you were looking at these teams that were really striving for success out on the field. They had a certain presence about them. I think that's been really cool to see, and now we have our competitive programming that allows us to provide that opportunity to different levels as they go through it, which also allows us the flexibility to say that players are going to grow and evolve, right? So as we're looking at our values to really drive what we do, we have the player-centered environment that has different levels to it that helps us not only respect our present, but also give respect to our past as well, to say like, hey, these are the founding kind of principles that were instilled into us at a very young age, that you kind of see us still living out and actually influencing others as well. Like you talked about our program managers and our directors and the coaching staff. It's really nice to see that we're building an organization that is holistic, both with the player abilities, the families that we have that are involved.
What have you seen in the Northeast Ohio market that has changed since you were a kid playing to present day you're leading a successful organization in Cleveland?
Biggest change, and I think I'm going to take this in two different directions. One is just the overall ecosystem. There's today way more clubs than there ever has been. When we were younger, there were only 5 real major clubs. I can always remember as a kid playing here in Northeast Ohio, and hindsight's always 20/20, is every game and every training session, and not to say D1 is immeasurable, we were 17 out of 18 kids that went D1, and then the team against us was another 15 or 14. So every single game you're playing against that level of athlete, that level of talent. Now you go to a game and sometimes the game resistance is fantastic, but you don't get it here in Northeast Ohio on a regular basis. You have to travel for it.
Correct.
Right? So the distance that you have to go to find a proper game is much greater than it ever has been. I'll definitely say this, though, at the younger ages, from when we were younger, the talent, as far as their ability to think about the game and their application of skill, is much higher, right? It's much higher. And I would say there's more quality coaches. I'm not going to say really superior and great coaches, but there's definitely more coaching in the marketplace, right? But because the market is so broad and saturated, it's very difficult to really develop the talent because the talent is too spread out, right? So from the ecosystem, I think the distance you have to go to get a proper game and get a good training session is definitely a big change. But from the player side of it, what has changed is the amount of resources that are available to them. They have a ton of resources, these kids, from the mental side, the nutrition side, the athletic development side, the skill development side. I just think that's amazing. I think it's an opportunity for a young player these days to really excel in the sport when you can find a nice blend, and I think that's what we're working on here at Force, is a way to make sure their families are educated on how to approach them, provide them a process within Cleveland Force to develop their skill, their body, and their mind as they go forward, and trying to do it in an ecosystem that geographically makes sense for our families, right? So when you look at Cleveland Force, what makes us unique is our ability now to address all those environmental barriers and making them more of a positive, from our coaching, our facility usage, our leadership, with all of us working from the same hymn sheet, that we're trying to make sure that these young men and ladies grow up with every opportunity that they can to meet their full potential, ultimately.